Hello and welcome back to Ambitious. I am really excited for today's topic because this is something that has massively impacted my business and frankly has impacted a lot of the businesses that I've supported in the ways in which they've been able to scale. Because the topic we're covering today is everything buyer types. And I will be very transparent with you. When I first came into the online world and into learning marketing and, learning really how to leverage social media to generate leads, to generate inquiries, I had no concept of buyer types, the fact that they existed, what they were, how they impacted our business. And it was once I started to really sink my teeth into understanding it, integrating it in the business, the feedback of what it looked like when it was integrated, and getting all that information that I started to really recognize the impact that this had on businesses, both from an aspect of marketing and sales and every single, area really when it comes to the way that we understand our audience and the way that they behave. And so I am a little psych nerd. So, like, if I have any way to better understand either my own behavior, the behavior of team, the behavior of clients, the behavior of, audiences, I am right there and I am in it. And so this was something that I really, once I sunk my teeth into it, I really nerded out on. And because of that, I saw the massive domino that it had on our business. And I saw the impact that the clarity and the understanding of this principle or of this concept and what it could really do when it was fully mastered and fully integrated. And so I'm really excited to teach these to you today. And this is something that's going to be, I would say, fairly meaty. So if you're somebody who, really wants to take this and run with it, I highly recommend taking this as your sign to pause the episode, go grab a piece of paper and pen, go grab that fresh Google Doc and get some notes ready. Because the one thing that I will say is that the exciting part about buyer types is the fact that you really don't have to necessarily have a lot of things in order to get started with it. You don't have to have a lot of stuff in order to be able to see change by having this clarity and integrating it. So, without further ado, let's kind of go into the one-on-one of like, what are even buyer types? And so one of the ways that I explain buyer types to most people who ask is buyer types are basically our audience's love language equivalent. And what I mean by that is like we each have a love language that we're typically most dominant in. I have a whole thought process on love languages, but for example, mine might be like physical touch is like my go-to love language. So holding my hand, whatever, that kind of stuff. And so that love language is the equivalent of a dominant way of behavior that our audience has when it comes to buying. And so when we're looking at buyer types, you want to think about buyer types as almost a set of behaviors or an identifying set of characteristics that a person in your audience has at a given moment. Now, the reason that I think I really want to accentuate at a given moment is because the thing that's also interesting about buyer types is that we can have people who have a dominant way of operating. But the thing you want to also consider is that in different situations, that buying type may adapt. So for example, and I'm going to kind of get into all the different types and how to know, which ones you have in your audience, how to market to them, how to sell to them. So we're getting into all the nitty-gritty. But one of the ones I'm going to be covering today is a driver buyer. And that is me through and through. That is my dominant. Now, it is not to say though that I am that type everywhere all the time in every moment. I have certain investments that I've made. I have certain things that I've purchased in my personal life where I have not been in my driver characteristics. And so, just like the love languages, you can have a dominant, you can have something that is your dominant love language with also appreciating other love languages and those being done. So, for example, for myself, acts of service, someone opening the door for me, someone bringing me a coffee, someone doing something that basically is an act of love to me is something that I still very much appreciate. But I would say I have a dominant for, physical touch as my love language. And so, because of that, the same thing is also going to be true just as much as it is for love languages in our buyer types. And so, buyer types really are the identifying characteristics of the ways in which our audience operate, in the way they consume our marketing, in the way that they experience and go through our sales process, and ultimately in the way that they close into becoming a customer. And so, by understanding these, just like a love language, you're able to better communicate with that person. So let's just take it back to this analogy. If you have a partner who really appreciates physical touch and you're like, yeah, but I'm getting them gifts after gifts after gifts, like they just don't seem to resonate. I'm like, yeah, because their love language is physical touch. Their love language is not gifts. Or maybe their love language is not words of affirmation. So you can say how amazing they are and appreciate them all day, every day. But if you don't hold her hand, it's not hitting the button that she needs to have hit for her to feel appreciated, right? So when it comes to the buyer types, the same thing is true. If you're selling and you're marketing and you're communicating with this person in a way and almost in a language that they don't personally resonate with, you can say a bunch of things and you can do a bunch of things in that marketing, in that sales process, but it still may not click. And it's not because necessarily what you're doing doesn't work in general. It doesn't work for this person because they have a specific archetype of how they operate. And so, by helping us to understand what the different types are, we're then able to use that education to empower us to know how to better communicate with the people in our world. Now, different than a love language, which is person to person, yes, this is person to person in your audience, but the good thing that we can tell you is that when you communicate a certain way in your marketing, you will actually create a dominant type of audience of buyer. So, you'll always have all of them in your audience at a given moment, but you'll create via your marketing a type of buyer that can be your dominant. And which one becomes your dominant is something that really is person to person. There's a lot of discussion around buyer types of, you really want to have an audience who's this kind of buyer. You really want to have an audience who's that kind of buyer. And, I don't personally believe in that. That's not a perspective that I would say that I agree with. I really believe that we have information in our world right now of what kind of buyer types you have. And we can use that information as power for us to understand how to be able to really effectively resonate with people. And that's really the basis of buyer types. And I'm going to tell you a story as well before we get into today. Because I had a client, and we've done previous episodes talking about this client in our case study episodes. And, with her audience, she was marketing and she had one of the types that we're going to discuss today and we're going to break down. We're going to call that the driver buyer type. And so she had a lot of driver buyers in her audience. And so what we came to realize was we started to market to them. And so we had messaging that was really tailored to them. And we had, things that were really designed for, again, that language that they needed to be spoken to in. Now, what was interesting though was, again, this goes back to the fact that your buyer types can change. Her marketing had been the exact same. Like we're talking the exact same for probably, I would say, like the last 2-3 years, and had always been pretty well the same tone. And so there became a moment in the business where things started to feel like we were putting out marketing, but it wasn't hitting quite the same. And it became this investigation, as marketing is. And you guys know how I feel about marketing. Marketing is equal parts quantitative, which is data, as much as it is qualitative, which is assessment, and frankly, the art of guessing. Anyone who tells you that they can know 100% what's going to happen with marketing, I have thoughts on that, because there really is an aspect of any marketing campaign that is guessing. And so this client had a rinse and repeat marketing strategy that they were using. And before they knew it, the things that they had once done and the things that they had once executed were not working anymore. And they were like, this is so weird because we've always done this. This is what we've always done. And the thing I also talk about all the time when it comes to marketing and selling is just because you've done it before does not mean it will always work. Marketing and sales, as much as there's principles that we integrate, just like buyer types will always be tried and true. How we integrate those, i.e. what platforms we use those on, or selling, whether we sell in the DMs or we sell on a phone call or we sell with a proposal or we sell in any which way, the modality we use to express the principle is always going to change in business. So you always have to be ready to adapt. But the principle itself remains the same, which today's principle is the buyer types. And so with this client, I said, listen, the principle remains to be true, but we want to look at how we're expressing it. And so I said, let's go to the data. So we go to the data and we start to assess, what her data is showing. And come to find out by looking at her data that her buyer types, I go through and she's like, what do you see? And I was like, I'm going to be honest with you. I have a feeling that your buyer types have shifted. And because she had been in such a pattern of speaking to the same person for so long, it was kind of something that she didn't really hyper assess a lot because there'd just been so much data to tell her that this was the type of buyer she had. And so I said, based off the data, there was some content that was really doing well compared to the others. And there were stories that she was putting up that were really doing well compared to the others. So I was like, I think your buyer type has shifted. So let's test the water and see if this is true. So we go and we make new marketing, we put out new content, and sure enough, the DMs start coming in, the applications start increasing, the engagement goes up. And what it confirmed for us was the fact that her pain points remained the same. Her outcomes she talked about remained the same. We talk about this a lot with marketing, right? In earlier episodes, we talk about like, pain points and desires are like the basic of marketing, right? Like that's very much like the fundamental starting point of being able to market what you do. But the thing that we came to discover was that basically the tone in which we were communicating it, i.e., the buyer type that we were tailoring that messaging to, was no longer the buyer type in our audience. And so, because of that, even though she was talking about the same points, she wasn't having that hit home with people. And this was such an accentuation to the impact of buyer types and the fact that number one, we can't get stagnant in looking at, oh, we've always done marketing this way, or we've always, done our messaging this way. And so because of that, we're just going to keep going with that. Just because it once worked doesn't mean it's going to always work for you. And so that's something we have to be aware of. But also remembering that marketing is something you have to keep a pulse on to constantly check, and remembering that your buyer types, even though you may have a dominant, can shift at a given moment, and we want to be aware of that. And so what we're going to go through today is we're going to go through the 4 different core buyer types that you're going to want to be aware of. And with this, we're also going to talk about how to identify them, i.e., how to know which ones you have in your audience. 2, how we're going to be able to tailor our marketing to really speaking to this type of buyer. And 3rd, when you are selling to them, whether on the phone, in DMs, in any sales process that you're selling to them, the ways you're going to want to be cognizant of the way you're selling to them. So the mastery of buyer types really comes from, number 1, obviously knowing what they are, but number 2, being able to constantly be in tune of assessment and looking at, what marketing is doing well and knowing what that means, what the person is doing in a sales conversation and knowing what that means, and how you should be tailoring your approach. And by doing that, you can see a drastic different outcome with the actions and behaviors your audience is taking. And so if you're at a loss right now and you're like, I'm just looking at my marketing and sales and I don't know why it's not hitting home for people, this could very well be the reason why. And so let's get into the 4 different types and really looking at how we can break these down. So the 4 different types, I'm going to go high level first, are analytical is going to be number 1. Number 2 is driver. Number 3 is amiable. And number 4 is expressive. And so for each one, as I said, we're going to break down what are the core traits of this person and this type, i.e., this love language, if you will. And we're going to go through the core traits, how to market to them, and what you're going to see happening in your marketing. And also with that, what you're going to be cognizant of in the sales process. Okay. So kicking off at number 1, we're going to go into the analytical buyer. This is somebody who is really, the buzzwords I want you to think about are they're very results oriented, they're data driven, and they're very strategic, and they make logical decisions. Okay. So core traits, and I have like so many things that we can use to identify these people. So I've got all the notes in front of me. I want to make sure I don't miss a single wicket for you. One of the things that is really a core trait of someone who's analytical is somebody who really is super, super, super into the nuts and bolts. What I mean by that is you will probably have questions of like, so how many trainings will we have? And when are the calls? And by the way, what happens if this happens? Like if I literally have had people on consults with me who have asked questions like, and again, like this is just an analytical buyer. They're like, okay, and what if I get really sick? Then what happens in the program? And like they think of everything. Like I mean everything. And so a analytical person is somebody who asks a lot of questions and is very, very focused on the specific micro details of any investment that they're making. I almost want you to think about an analytical buyer is somebody who like would take and print out all the papers of the investment that they're making, and they would look at all the information, all the numbers, all of the possible situations. They think best case scenario, worst case scenario, like they're thinking through everything that probably isn't even on your brain yet. And because of this, they make very logical, evidence-based decisions. They do not make decisions just based off of emotion or like, just take action and step into the next level of yourself. That's not going to work for an analytical buyer. That's not the way in which they make their decisions. They really like to see results. They really like to see details. They really like to see the numbers to be able to logically, in an evidence-based way, give themselves full confidence that this is the right choice they need to be making. And so because of that, they often ask a lot of questions to be able to gather that evidence and gather that data. And so they really also love the aspect of comparison. So like to be able to see, transformations in people's marketing. They love to see the comparisons of like this versus that. And they also typically are somebody that is going to really engage with the social proof that you're putting out or any of the frequently asked questions or the details about your offer. They're going to be really right up in there. The thing that I will say when it comes to the marketing to this person, you really want to accentuate case studies and giving as much detail of the process. So, for example, my case study episodes that we do on this podcast are something that an analytical buyer would nerd out on because that is not just social proof of, hey, I got my client here, but it's breaking down all the nitty gritty of the best things that happen, the worst things that happen, the process in between, the thought process, the resistance they experience. Like I leave no stone unturned. And for an analytical buyer, they're like, okay, yes, like I want to know all the nuts and bolts. Like, give me all of that. And so they really like all the details. And so if you're finding that you're getting asked a lot of like more micro questions and you're constantly getting that in anything in your world right now, you may have a lot of analytical buyers that are in your world at this moment. And so one of the ways that we can really, speak to these people is also to make sure that with an analytical buyer, you want to be aware of the fact that they really are super into the features, which is what I mean when I say nuts and bolts. They want to know when the calls are. They want to know about the contract. They want to know about, what time will the calls be hosted. They want to know all of those details. And again, that's because in their mind, only once they have enough evidence can they confidently tell themselves that they're okay and they basically feel safe to move forward. So the thing that you can also do in marketing is use a lot of the kind of, features of your offers and the highlights of it. You can have, for example, something that would be like a pinned post that would sit on your feed that's kind of like the high level of your offers and what they come with. They also really are the people who nerd out on the sales pages. So the sales pages that go through frequently asked questions, they love those. They love that section. That's for them. The support overview and all the details of like what it comes with on sales pages, that's for our analytical people. So like they are the people who want to know all of the ins and outs of what the offer is and also think about not only best case, but also worst case scenario and also have an answer to those situations. And what's interesting I've been in, programs and I've done, facilitation for people and help them to integrate this. As I'm saying this, you also, when we're going through these buyer types, maybe like, wait a second, that's literally me. Like I ask all the questions. I want to know every single answer. And like, listen, there's nothing wrong with that. Like every single one of these are people who will buy. And that's the thing that I also want to make very clear as we go through this. The buyer types that I'm explaining, all of these will invest. They just invest differently. So, and also at different speeds. And so it's really just remembering that because you have these different types, they all can be clients. It's just the rate or the speed at which they become a client and the process of how they become a client may shift slightly. So, remembering that with analytical people, they're really into the case studies. They want the depth. They want the social proof. They want to know they can get results, but they also want to know the process of how someone got to those results. They want the features of your offer. They want the frequently asked questions in your marketing. They really want you to pre address potential concerns and objections that they may have or that they're already thinking of their mind. Because remember, they think of everything. Now, when it comes to selling to an analytical buyer, the thing that I think is really important is that this information is available for them. If they don't have that information accessible to them, that's how they kind of coach themselves, frankly, on investing. And so if you're getting inundated with questions, let's just say in a sales process on a phone call or in DMs, oftentimes that's because you don't have that information available. And so something that I can tell you, even as a story for myself with analytical buyers, I literally, as we record this, it is 2024. And until this moment, literally, I want to say like 2 weeks ago, we launched our website for the first time. And until like in my business for years, I have never had a website. And we've done well. Like we have not needed a website to be able to, turn people who were interested into customers. But what was interesting was we had a situation where, again, in understanding the buyer types, we had a lot of people who were in our DMs and saying, hey, like, and how long is the program and what does it come with? And, I was curious about, what kind of panelists do you have inside? And, does that come with one-on-one calls? And they were asking what I was like, ding, 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 this is an analytical buyer, and I do not have this information accessible for them anywhere. So when that symptom came up in our sales processes, I started to realize that, again, I had an influx of analytical buyers. I had people who were really wanting the nuts and bolts. And if I didn't have that information accessible to them, it meant that they didn't have what they needed to gather the evidence to feel safe to be ready to invest with us. And so I was like, if I don't do this, i.e., if I don't have this information available for them, I'm really missing out on a ton of people who need just that information to be able to move forward. And until that point, we've been sending the information in DMs or via email to people in a variety of different, pathways. But when it came to seeing that behavior happening in our sales process, we were like, okay, we know what we needed to do. We needed to get a website and sales pages about our offers up as fast as possible. And so that's what we did in our sales process. One of the things you're going to see with an analytical buyer is they need to have your information accessible of the nuts and bolts of what come with your offer. And this, yes, obviously is something technically you can send to them, but when they have the ability to go get that information on their own, what ends up happening is when you end up marketing day after day after day, every time you market and they feel this cue of like, oh my gosh, I feel like I need to work with her. Like I need to work with her. When they feel that pulse, that pull to work with you, they then will go to your website. They then will go to your resources and go through those resources to basically give themselves the okay or give themselves the permission to say like, yes, I'm ready to move forward. Why? Because they have the evidence that they need to feel confident and safe to do so. And so sales pages, landing pages, or better yet, websites for people who have a lot of analytical people in their audience can be very, very beneficial. Now, one thing that is essential when you have somebody in a sales process, whether again via messages or on a sales consult or anything like that, and they're asking a ton of questions, analytical people do not do well with being challenged or being put under pressure. So if you are someone who's trying to push someone who needs this information, you're going to push them out of buying because they do not do well under pressure. They are somebody who needs the information, and only when they have the information will they move. And so it really is important that when you're selling to somebody who is an analytical buyer, that you're not pushing too hard on getting them to move on your timeline. Instead, the motivation becomes, how do I give them as much evidence as they possibly could need to be able to make them feel empowered that they're ready to buy? And so I really believe in giving them as much supporting information as possible. So what I mean by that is trying to give them as much as you can. So the question becomes, is there anything that you can add as part of the sales process or as part of your sales experience that allows them to feel empowered to move? So, for us, it may be a matter of an example of this being when someone fills out an application and then they go to book a call with you. Is there something that you can have on that thank you page that gives them more information of frequently asked questions or social proof? Is there something that you can, for example, send to somebody in their email confirmation once they book a call with you that gives them even more information that they can look at prior to talking to you? When we can stack as much information as possible and again, as much evidence as possible in the sales process prior to the consult, they're empowered with more information that they need to be able to make a decision on that call. Otherwise, what will end up happening, which still may happen from time to time with analytical buyers anyway, is that you will have people who get on a consult with you who say, oh my gosh, this was so helpful. Can you send me more information? And so the thing that we can do to offset that is front load as much information and details as possible, and then allow the call to be the finishing touch that allows us to kind of like tie up loose ends, if you will, and overcome any objections or resistances they have. Because again, remember with an analytical buyer, they're going to have objections because that's their natural way of thinking and operating. Like they really think in all the worst case scenario. And so what I often see is the disconnect in this when, people are selling is that they hear objections and they think, oh, this person doesn't want to buy. They hear resistances of like, well, what if this happens? And what if that happens? And like, okay, well, this person's not serious or they're not, ready to move. And I personally would disagree. I've had people and like, they know who they are. I've had people in my programs who have been hyper analytical. Like when they came to me, they were somebody who, was super, super analytical. They had a ton of resistance in the sense of they thought of every worst case scenario. They thought of everything that could go wrong. And they came to me, they're like, Kate, what about this? And what about that? And what about this? I'm like, great question. I would say this and I would say this. And like, I didn't invalidate it. I was like, listen, like, great question, great question. And I would answer it. And the reason that I'm answering it is because I know that this person needs this question answered. They need this hole to be addressed in order for them to feel confident to move forward. And so that became the focus of the sales calls is to really look at when I'm selling to that person, how do I give them what they need? And those became incredible clients because they're very detail oriented and they think of everything and they're really into the nuts and bolts, which meant that they were actually very good clients. They paid attention to detail. They were people that when they came into the actual service were at every single call. They had all of our calls added to their calendar. Like they were great clients. And so I also don't want you to think because someone is asking a lot of questions that they're not serious in investing with you. Or if they have a lot of objections, they're not serious in investing with you. The thing that they need is they need to feel validated and they need to feel heard and they need to feel supported in getting that information that they're asking for. And so we can, when we again know what kind of buyer types you have dominant in your audience, we can integrate that as part of your sales process. And we can also integrate it as part of the way in which you communicate to people when you're selling to them. So whether that's on the phone, via messages, if it's even for a passive offer, that can also be something we integrate. So I'm going to give you an analogy to really think about with each of these. So the analogy that we're going to use is we're going to think about somebody who's looking to hire a trainer. Okay. So they're looking for fitness coaching. And so if someone is an analytical buyer, this person is going to do a ton of research on the trainer. Okay. Like they are going to be like, okay, yes, I want to work with this trainer, but I want to see what qualifications do they have? What certifications do they possess? What kind of reviews of their experience? Like I want to know what makes them legit or qualified to be able to support me. They also are going to look hyper attention and have a ton of attention onto the program itself, the structure of the program, the nuts and bolts of the program or the service. They're going to ask a ton of questions about not only what is the service, but what approach you take and what is the process or the experience of what it's going to look like for them. They also are somebody who's going to be really looking at the data or the evidence that they can look for of client success rates. They want to know how many people who have done this have ultimately been successful and what does that look like. And they want the reviews because they look at reviews to also see, did anybody else who took this program, service, or experience also have similar objections or resistances that they also feel or have coming up for them. And so all of those are things that this person is going to do when they're hiring a trainer. So it kind of gives you a little bit of a high level of, number one, how we address them. Number two, how we're going to be able to market to them. Three, what we need to be aware of in selling to them. And fourth, what this would look like in an example if they're going to hire a fitness trainer. So again, let's go back to the high level of the core words that I want you to think of with analytical buyers. We have results based. They are very focused on data. They are all about the strategy and the process and the nuts and bolts. And they make logical, non-emotional based decisions. Okay. So they're not somebody that you're going to, motivate into buying. Okay. So that is buyer type number 1 of 4. Now, buyer type number 2 of 4 is our driver buyers. And this is me. Okay. And frankly, this is actually quite a bit of my audience. A lot of my audience is driver buyers. And I have a lot of ambitious, driven women in my world who, once they set their mind to something, they know they want it and nothing is getting in their way. And they're all about getting to the outcome as fast as possible. And you may be her. So if so, hi. You may be somebody who feels like you're like, I know that I'm destined for this outcome. I know that I want to get there as fast as possible. I know that I want to, hit this target or hit this outcome in my business, in my life, and no one is going to tell me otherwise. And if so, I am right there with you, girl, because I am the same way, which is why I also myself am a driver buyer. And so driver buyers, the key words I want you to think about is that they are extremely decisive, they are efficient, they are confident, and they are assertive as some of the core traits. And I'm going to go through some more in detail here for you. So core traits of a driver buyer. It kind of feels like I'm like reading my dating profile in a little bit because this is so much of who I am. They're extremely decisive. So they are people who take action and they don't need a lot of information. And I will actually say that this trait is actually sometimes to a fault for me because I probably could frankly use a little bit more information in some of the decisions I've made because I don't really look at the nuts and bolts. I am not somebody who ever goes into the nitty-gritty details, and frankly sometimes after I make an investment I'm like, "Wait, by the way, what do I get with this?" Or like, "What does this look like?" And I think about it after I've invested because I really take action without needing a ton of information because I'm extremely decisive. Like when I know I want something, I'm doing it. They're extremely results oriented. So I want you to remember with a driver buyer, the thing that they care about most is that they want outcomes and they want results more than they want features or any of the nuts and bolts. Okay. So they're really about talk to me about how I'm getting to my goal. Talk to me about how I'm getting to my goal over and over again. And it really is not something that they're going to want, how many calls come with it and how long is it? And what about in this situation? Like that's not stuff that they personally really care about. You will also notice most of the time, that they are pretty assertive and confident in the sense of like who they are. They really take charge of the buying process. And so you'll probably see, sometimes if you're doing sales calls, you'll see people who really come in and they're super, super ego driven. So I remember vividly that I had this client and I worked with her for 2 years. And we joked about it afterwards. But when she came to me, she got on the sales call and so I was like, great, like let's talk about it kind of thing. She's like, well, first of all, I just want to say that I don't have any problems. Everything's going great. And I'm like, okay, sure. Like, no problem. I'm like, hey, driver buyer, how's it going? It was funny because it was immediately like, I know what I'm doing. Nothing is wrong. And, like she was just really, really confident that she knew what she was doing. And she was like, I don't really need help, but I'm just like curious about how to get to my goal faster. And I was like, this is so easy for me because I know exactly who you are now. And so it was interesting because for her, she really had, when I say super high ego, it wasn't like egotistical in a negative way. Like she was very confident in herself. She knew what she wanted, and there was nobody who was going to, add any kind of blurriness to her vision. And so when she came in, she really took charge. Now, the thing you have to be aware of with the driver buyers is there's this duality because when you're seeing them on calls, it can be really easy to see them want to take over the buying process, i.e. you feel like it's kind of like how are they running this call? We don't want that. So we're going to come back to that in the sales side of things, but it's something you want to be aware of. If you see really big energy coming into the call, you have to match that energy because otherwise they will completely dominate, which is not something that we want. They are extremely efficient. So they are people who are very impatient. So this means that we are not looking to dilly-dally in anything that they're looking to do. So like if they send you messages and you can see the traits of a driver buyer, you don't want to take a week to respond to that person because frankly, by that point, they probably have already moved on and invested in somebody else. They're somebody who really is super efficient. They're very productive of their time. And they really are, frankly, if I can put it candidly, very impatient in the way that they consume marketing and in the way that they invest. They also are somebody who is fairly risk oriented in the sense of like they really are open to taking risk. I would say that they're probably pretty calculated in the way that they take risks though. So they're pretty comfortable with uncertainty. Like they don't really need, 90% of the information to move, which is why we're saying that they move very quickly. It's really like they will take risk. They take calculated risk. They consider all the factors, but still it's not uncomfortable for them to make a move before they have all the pieces sorted out. And so also something you're going to notice and that you're going to hear in their tone is that they're extremely competitive. There's somebody who's really, aware of the other people in the race and also very aware that they're here to win and that they're here to get the outcome that they desire. They're very, and I mean very, results oriented. They are all about getting to their destination, their goal of whatever that is, as fast as humanly possible. And because of that, when it comes to engaging with them, they really need to be accentuated in that. They need to be seen in what their goal is. They need to be validated in what their goal is and how you're going to help them to collapse time in getting there. They also are somebody that you'll see does really well with very direct call to actions and also marketing that speaks to how to get to this certain outcome as fast as possible. They really, really resonate with that. Because of that, they're also somebody that you're going to see does super, super well and is very present in goal-based discussions. So like when you're talking about things that are about hitting a certain outcome or about getting to their results very quickly, they're going to be right in there with you because that's something that they really resonate with and that they kind of live in that world. And so those are kind of the core traits of someone who's going to be a driver buyer. Now, in your marketing, oh, it's so fun. These driver buyers, because it gets me too. Like, listen, I'm a client, I'm a customer in some instances, right? Like, I'm not always the marketer. So, like, I fall for this as a driver buyer through and through. I love a results anything. I want the social proof. I want the case studies. Give me the way that I'm going to know that you're going to help me to get to my outcome. Once I see the numbers, I see the screenshots, I see the testimonials, I see like, hey, this person helped me to get here in less than 6 months. I'm like, boom, that's what I needed. Like I need to know this person has the ability to get me to the outcome and the result that I'm looking for. You also can use very clear and direct language with them. The one thing that I will say is that because a driver buyer is somebody that is fairly confident and fairly, clear on who they are and how they operate, they also are not scared or uncomfortable being challenged. If anything, you actually in your marketing want to stroke their ego and be like, listen, you're not somebody who's trying to take 12 months to get to your goal. You and I both know that you're ready to hit this goal and that you're willing to do what it takes in the next 3 months. What I'm doing is I'm complimenting how they are as a person and the traits that they possess. And I'm also acknowledging and recognizing the goals that they're going for. And so in my marketing, I really use super direct language and very clear messaging that says, like, hey, if you're this person wanting this thing, yeah, this is for you. And trust me, because I know who you are. And it makes them feel seen when they're consuming our marketing. And with this, I'm also very clear in the call to actions that I use. So, like, I might say something like, DM sales if you know that you're someone who is not planning on waiting 6 months to get to that target and you're ready to make that happen in the next 90 days. Right? Like, it's something that kind of like gently challenges them, but also recognizes the kind of person that they are and the traits that they have. And it's a very clear and concise, here's how to get it, like, come get it kind of thing. And so by doing that, they are people that are like, yes, and they feel like, again, short, sweet, to the point. They don't want to mess around and say, like, go through our process where you can fill out an application and then book a call. I'm like, hey, you want to come do this thing? Come get it and come message me this word. Go do this exact thing right now if that's the outcome that you want. And they like that because it's something that is direct, it's efficient, it's quick, and it gets them in for whatever it is, the support that they're looking for as fast as possible. Now, the thing that I will also say does also work with this type of buyer is that they also work well with urgency and scarcity. They actually respond pretty well to urgency and scarcity. So, limited time offers, exclusive deals that you have, limited availability things that you might promote. And you'll also see, which is something that's also a very clear trait in the marketing, is that when you have people who inquire with you who haven't been following you for that long, that's somebody who really moves quickly. Like, once again, they see the evidence that they need, they move. They're not about building a relationship with you. They're not about needing more time to get the nuts and bolts. They are somebody who's like, ooh, this resonates with me. Boom, let's go. And I have literally, from many of my clients, they're like, hey, I found you. Like, some of my longest standing clients found me within like 48 hours and resonated with a piece of messaging or a video or something that I put out. And it spoke to, again, their ego and their personality and their confidence and their persona. And they invested within 48 hours into some of our highest ticket offerings and have been in there for a while. And so the thing I want to tell you with driver buyers is once they know, they move fast. And so the marketing really has to have social proof. Your marketing has to showcase results. If you want to bring in somebody who's a driver buyer, you need to speak their language. You need to know and be able to identify and say, like, listen, I know that you're this person and you're probably doing things like this and you're probably acting like this and you're probably looking to achieve this year, right? And like, once they feel seen, they're like, ooh, that's me. And they also then fully close the loop in being ready to invest by having the proof that other people have achieved the thing that you're telling them you're going to help them with. And so when we're looking at marketing, we're talking highlights of results. We're talking about data of, showing them what they need to see, of how you're going to help them to get there as fast as possible. You want very direct language. You want clear language that also complements and acknowledges who they are while giving them an invitation for the next step. And you also want to have lots and lots, and I mean lots, of social proof. So, when it comes to selling to a direct type of person like this and a driver buyer, so selling to a driver buyer is actually pretty simple, if I'm going to be honest with you. When you're when you're in a sales process with a driver buyer, the thing we need to be aware of is the fact that you need to acknowledge where they're at energetically. So when they come in and they try to dominate a phone call with you, or they're just kind of like, what's your price? Or like, when do I move forward? Or what about this? Like, they're kind of like driving the bus. You want to reinstate your authority within that sales process. But the way in which you do that is not to make them feel small or less than. It's to acknowledge it and say, listen, you and I both know that, let's say I'm on a sales call with someone. They're like, yeah, like, let's just cut to the chase. If I hear that, I'm like, hi, driver. Because there's somebody, again, who's very big emphasis on respecting their time and being efficient. And so I don't beat around the bush when I get into, sales processes like this. There's no fluffy language. There's no added parts to the process. I am very clear in these conversations. And I may even set the frame on a call with someone and say, listen, I just want to be honest. Once I feel their energy out and they're starting to be like, yeah, like, this is where I want to go. This is what I want to do. I'm like, listen, let's just cut to the chase. You and I both know that you're not somebody who needs all the nuts and bolts and all the features and all of the micro little pieces. Like, I can tell by what you're saying to me that you're really ready to go for that big next goal and that you're really, frankly, looking to get there as fast as possible. Does that sound about right? And they're like, yeah, 100%. I'm like, beautiful. So with that being said, here's the 101 of it. And I'm very direct with them and I'm extremely confident in my delivery. Why? Because if I'm not confident in the way that I'm direct and the way that they need to be communicated to, they're not somebody who's going to buy because they're not in a sales process, they're going to try to dominate, but you need to match the energy. You need to be just as confident. And it can't be you going through all the nuts and bolts because you think that if you don't do that, they're not going to buy. And this is where your belief in a sales process really comes in. Because when you are selling to a driver buyer, you need to be very aware that because they're very efficient on time, and that's the most important thing to them, you can't be taking tons and tons of time in the sales process going through all these things that, frankly, are really supportive for you, but they're not actually supportive for the driver buyer. And so, because we know that they're all about saving time, we need to be very direct. We need to give them the direct information about here's how we're going to help you to get to your goal as fast as possible. Here's what that's going to look like. Here's what I anticipate in the sense of results for you. You want to hit this result. I would really also accentuate the results that they want to go for and making sure that you're vocal about those in a sales conversation. Things like, listen, you mentioned that you want to hit 7 figures, and that's absolutely possible in the sense of that's something we absolutely can support you with. And listen, I know you're not looking to do this in some slow pace. You're really looking to hit the ground running and do this quickly, right? Like it's really echoing what their goals are and what their vision is and making them feel understood and heard in the things that they're expressing to you. And so when we're looking to sell to this person, we're trying to save time as much as possible. We're trying to be as direct as we possibly can. And again, we're trying to validate and complement the ego, complement the confidence with also showing them how you're going to support them with that and getting to the next level. So something that is also, really important when it comes to driver buyers is remembering that even though they move quickly, they need to still feel like they have what they need to move forward. They need to feel like they feel validated, that they feel seen, that they feel confident you can get them there. And again, remembering to talk about social proof. So the way in which we do this, for example, in some of the sales consults I've hosted, is I have said, you know what, you actually really remind me of client so-and-so because she was actually just like you. She was motivated. She was ready to go. She was like, someone who was not looking to do this in a slow pace. Like she was really looking to 2-3x her business kind of thing very quickly. And when she came to me, she was here and in X amount of time we did this. And like, you very much have the similar traits to her. And so because of that, like, I really think if we hit the ground running quickly here, we can get you, moving quickly toward that goal you're looking to. So what I'm doing is I'm basically helping them to see that I have helped other people who were just like them, either the type of industry they are, the type of offer that they have, whatever it may be, and that I can also help them to hit their target or help them to see the outcomes that they're looking for. And so I really also try to integrate social proof and talking about results that I've generated for other people who are similar to them into our conversation so that that's getting planted throughout the entire conversation as well. So again, really what we're going to be looking at, let's just say someone's looking to hire a trainer, they're going to be looking to see, can this person get me the outcomes that I want? Can they get me, to where I want to be? And they're looking for specifics. So they're looking to be like, is this person like the muscle gain expert? Is this person the weight loss expert? Like whatever it might be, is this the person that's going to help me to really get my results as fast as possible and as easy as possible of a pathway? They want a structured program. They want to know, for example, that this trainer is going to be the person who gives them all the milestones they need to get to their goal. And they really want to see and be confident that this person can get them measurable results. Like, show me what you've done for people. Tell me how we're going to get there and how you're going to help me to do that quickly and that you're the person for me to hire. And if I feel like I have that clear, then I'm going to move forward. And so driver buyers, listen, as myself being a driver buyer, the thing that everyone loves, which is why, in the earlier part of today, I talked about the fact that I don't really believe in having like a dominant or trying to create a dominant audience. The common messaging in the marketing world is that the fact that people want to see more driver buyers. People want to see, I want to try to create as many of these in my audience as possible. And listen, is that possible when it comes to your messaging and, creating an audience that really is tailored to that? Sure. But I can tell you, as being a driver buyer myself, it depends on the investment because I'm not a driver buyer in every single situation. Like I am not somebody who, regardless of what I'm investing into, is a driver buyer. When I make bigger investments, when I make bigger decisions, I also at times will look at, okay, and like, what does it come with? And like, what about this? And like, what about in this situation? Like, and then I become very analytical, right? And in certain situations, I'm also a very emotional buyer, which we're going to get into in a second here. So it really is situation to situation. And I want to make sure that you remember that even though someone may have a dominant, it doesn't necessarily mean that they can't shift in the way in which they buy. And so just like that client I talked about earlier, that person also had a very dominant driver buyer audience, i.e. people who needed very little to move, but once they found like they had the evidence, they moved very quickly. And it was almost like impulsive. Like you just kind of were able to say like, okay, great. Like this is what I need. Got it. Let's go. And because they had a ton of those buyers and then eventually that shifted, they were like, whoa, what's happening? And that's because your audience can shift. So you don't want to get too in a rut of believing that someone can only be one type. We want to be cognizant of the fact that people can shift. But of course, if you have an audience that's very dominant driver buyers, that is something that, can obviously be great because they know what they want and they're confident and they move forward with it. And frankly, if I'm going to be really honest with you, you listening to this may be on the more likely scale a driver buyer because in my audience, I have a boatload of driver buyers, and I'll tell you why. I attract very confident, ambitious, driven, motivated women. Women who are like, get out of my way when they're going toward their goal. And listen to this podcast. The podcast is named Ambitious. Like it calls in a certain type of woman. And so yes, can you, tailor some of your marketing and have your messaging be there because of the mission that I have and, frankly, the kind of person or personality that I have, I attract a lot of other me's. Like I attract a lot of other people who are very similar to me. My marketing is a mirror of myself. And so because of that, my clients are literally like little twins of me and the way that I operate and the way that I think, which is part of, why we have so much fun when we go into coaching. But the thing that I'm also aware of is the fact that it doesn't mean that everybody in my audience is a driver buyer. And so I always keep that at the forefront for myself to remember that so that I never get into kind of like a one way of operating. So we're going to pivot slightly. And I want to, before we do, accentuate something for you. Analytical and driver are two people that are extremely strategy based. They are very outcome based and they are strategy focused in their mind. They really make emotions from a strategic or a more structured based thinking. Okay. They are, if I could put it candidly, somebody who puts a lot of the emphasis of the decisions that they make in the masculine. We're going to shift now to the other side. So, like a way that you can also look this up, if you also look up these 4 buyer types on Google, you'll see a visual of a quadrant and it's four boxes, a square. And so, in those, on the left hand side, you're going to see people that are a little bit more strategic, i.e., they're a little bit more in their masculine in the way that they make decisions. And now we're going to go to the right side of the quadrant, which is the people who move a little bit more of the emotional bucket, a little bit more of the feminine energy bucket when they go to make decisions. And again, as I said at the earlier part of today's episode, this is not a right or wrong. This is not a matter of this is like a better or a worse type of buyer to have. All of these buyers invest. They just invest in different ways and again, in different love languages, if you will. So the next one we're going to go to is Amiable. And Amiable are like, they're just so sweet. They're so sweet in the way in which they buy and like the behavior that they have. Amiable is number 3, and they are, again, in the more feminine, more emotional based bucket. They're somebody who's very relationship focused. They're extremely empathetic. They're very patient and they're extremely collaborative are the kind of the key words I want you to associate with them. So I want to give you a little visual of an amiable buyer, core traits that you can identify with them. They are somebody who really values relationship. They want to feel like they know you and that they feel like they can trust you and that they have a quasi relationship with you before they invest. They really look at the emotional benefits of what you're doing and the emotional benefits of how your product, your service, your offer is going to support them. That's something that really like they care about and that is important for them at the forefront. And for them, they're also somebody that's very conflict averse. They're not somebody that's going to, have a confrontation. There's someone who's very positive. There's someone who kind of, goes in the opposite way of disagreements. So like, for example, when you're putting out like polarizing content, they're not going to be the person who's like right in there with you being like, oh, and I believe this. Like they're kind of just like, I don't want to get involved kind of thing. Like they're a little bit more passive, I guess I would say, in the way in which they engage. And they try to stay as neutral and kind of, I would say, middle of the line as possible. They're very empathetic. So they really seek to be, understood. And also with that, they seek to really understand other people and to get new perspectives is something that they're constantly looking for. They are, though, fairly indecisive. So they struggle with decision making. They often take their time. And with this, they may seek additional input. So these may be the people who say, listen, like I really want to speak to my husband. I really want to sit with this decision. I really want to, think through this and kind of circle back with you. They can be those who need to sit with making an investment or feel like that they need to get a buy-in of somebody else. I actually just talked to a client the other day and she had somebody that she was on a call with and they were like, yeah, I really want to talk to my COO before I make this decision, really sit with it and kind of process it, sit with the emotions of it. And they really seek input from other people and they still they're indecisive because they stew on things, right? Like they really think about their decisions from an emotional based place just as much as they, might look at the information. They really are like, how does this emotionally sit with me? How do I feel about this? Basically, is the way that they look at the investments they're making. And they're very relationship driven. So because of that, they're very loyal. So like if they've been like somebody who has a relationship with a certain type of, marketer online, a certain type of brand online, they're typically very loyal to that brand, even after, frankly, they make an investment to that person, even after they're done being the client. There's somebody who really like, they're just the sweetest, softest, emotional based buyers. But the thing that people don't love about these types of buyers is the fact that they do feel a lot. And because of that, they don't feel and act off impulse. So remember when we were talking about the analytical, and the analytical was someone who had to sit with things and process through things with information. The amiable is kind of their equal, but they process and sit with things from an emotional based standpoint of, can I trust this person? Is this the right time for me to do this? Like, do I feel like this is the moment where I need to move? They sit and they ponder and they pontificate, but they do it in a way where they're assessing the feeling. They're not assessing the information necessarily. And so I think that that's a really key distinction of people that are amiable. And so when it comes to amiable, let's talk a little bit about the things that we can talk about in our marketing that really resonate with them. Something that they really resonate with, because again, they're very emotional, is the fact that they really resonate with storytelling. And again, part of the reason that I do a lot of case study type content is because case studies actually hit two wickets. They hit the here's where I got my client in a sense of talking about the outcomes. And I always start with that, which really hits the driver buyers. Why do I start with that? Because the driver buyers are impatient. They're somebody who doesn't have a lot of time to listen to all the nuts and bolts of the episode. They're just like, hey, where did you get this person in what amount of time? And I start every episode with the results first. So there's a reason for you, and I'm breaking the fourth wall. So you're welcome. Now, after that, then what do? I go into the people who are going to want the nuts and bolts. So I break down all of the things step by step of what we did. Who's that helping? That's helping our analytical people. And so there's a reason that I break down our entire process of how we help these clients, because analytical people want to hear that. They want to know that. They want all the details of what worked, what didn't. But there's also the aspect of our more emotional buyers, and they want to know, what did the person go through? What were the emotions they experienced? How did they shift in their perspective? What was the story in between all of the stuff? And so I also integrate that in our case study episodes. So the thing that you will see, and now that I'm breaking the fourth wall, you're going to be able to see all my marketing and be like, Kate, I see you. I know what you're doing. And I'm doing it because I want to help you guys. I want to help you to, in your marketing, to be able to do the same thing as well. And listen, like this is not a secret. Like you can find all of this information anywhere you want. I'm just consolidating it all for you so you can take it and run with it. But, what I want to accentuate here is the fact that in our marketing, we need to be sharing stories to hit home with our amiable buyers. They are somebody who also really gets behind people that they feel have a very clear mission and a very clear set of values. I actually had a client recently, and she said, listen, I've been listening to your podcast and I've been watching your marketing, and I realized that like we have very similar values. We care about the same things. And so she was like, it made me realize like you're my person because you care about the stuff that I care about. And I've been looking for a mentor who had those values. And so that's not someone who looked at the nuts and bolts. It's not somebody who made an impulse decision. She was like, listen, like you stand for what I stand for, so I want to work with you. It was about our relationship. It was about our connection as people, less, about anything else. And so they also are somebody who typically is fairly community driven. So there's somebody who's going to be really engaged most likely in your community. They might be, consuming your content pretty consistently, engaging with your content, liking it, commenting on it, like really showing support in solidarity with you of the things that you stand for and the things that you're expressing. But they do so in a pretty passive way. Like they're not super loud about it, but they are there supporting you behind the scenes. They also would be someone who probably is engaging on your polls. They may be asking questions behind the scenes. They really are encouraging and supportive of you and of your brand. And with this, they also really enjoy seeing the relationships that you have. So for example, like I've had people who've invested with me because they see the types of relationships that I have with my clients, and the fact that like a lot of my clients frankly become friends, like we become, connected. And they're like, I like the fact that you have relationships with your clients and that you're not like in this whole like separated of like I have my certain identity over here and I can't connect with you in this way. And they appreciate that. And so because somebody really focuses on relationships, they also want to see that the relationships you have are being demonstrated with your clients, with those on your team, whoever it might be. Like they want to see you living and embodying the values that you have. And so with this, they're actually somebody, if I could put it in basic summary in your marketing, they're somebody who really wants to see that you stand for something, that you have a clear mission, that you have very clear, understandable values that you stand behind, that you really care about relationships, that you care about people in the DMs, that you care about people in the sales process, that you're not in it for the transaction, that you're not pushing them. You really resonate with them as the person, not just about the process. And I'm going to give you another example of this because I go to this breakfast spot here in town and I have this one server that I go to see. And this is such an example of the amiable type of experience because the reason that I go to this restaurant is not because of their pancakes, which they happen to be pretty delicious, but I went to this restaurant not just because of the pancakes and not because of how quick they get the food out and not because of anything other than my relationship with the server. And I literally will go and I will wait till I get to sit in the server section because I just love her to bits. And that is the expression of amiable buying. It's the fact that I'm going in to do something and to invest and to, spend money somewhere because of the relationship that I have with the person who's providing the service. And, frankly, I could go somewhere and get a heck of a lot better breakfast than I do when I go there and, service and all these things, but I don't go for those things. I go for the relationship and being able to see her and chat with her and the relationship that we have together. I love seeing her. And, you also will see this when it comes to maybe somebody that you're investing with right now, right? Or maybe even outside of the online space. There's a reason you go to the same hairdresser over and over and over again. There's a reason that you might go to the same person for a certain service that you do. The same, maybe it's the person who does your nails or the person, whatever it might be. It can be in anything. And it's because of the relationship you have with them. And so even if someone was to say like, okay, well, what about this thing? It has these great features over here and this person can do it in quicker time. And you're like, yeah, but like I like Sarah. Like, Sarah's my girl. She's the one who always does my nails, or she's the one who always does my hair. And so when you have this relationship and you have that bond with somebody, remember when I spoke about loyalty, you have this aspect of loyalty, right? Like you go to that person again and again because the relationship is the dominant thing for you, which is again going back to the accentuation of the fact that we can shift our buckets of the way in which we invest in certain instances. So for example, my hair, I go to the same girl over and over and over again, and I don't go to anybody else because I have a relationship with her. But in other instances, for example, say I need to get my car cleaned. Well, I don't have somebody who, details my car that I have a relationship with. So if someone else is available earlier or can do it quicker, or I feel like has better features or things that they offer, nuts and bolts of what they do for the same price, I might go to that place versus another because of that factor. So again, remember that our buying ways can change situation to situation. So amiable buyers, let's talk about them in sales. They're very friendly and approachable. They're somebody who really you want to focus on building a lot of rapport with. So if you're in the DMs, you want to build rapport, you want to build relationship. If you're on a call, you don't want to skip through so let's get into it. You don't want to do that with somebody who's amiable. You want to take your time, you want to focus on the relationship, you want to build connection with them. You also want to really actively listen to what their experience is. They want to feel heard. They want to feel appreciated. They want to feel validated and connected to. They want to feel like you care about their perspective and their experience. They also are somebody who really does value stories. So when I'm explaining and I'm talking to somebody about their business and I'm selling them on any, one thing, I might express and talk about the fact of, what? Oh, you remind me of so and so. And I'm not talking about it in a quick fashion just to like throw out the metrics. I'm talking about the experience. I'll be like, listen, I had a client who came to me feeling the exact same way you were of like, is this the right time? Should she invest right now? I'm like, listen, I can so appreciate that. You've got a lot going on right now. And I would go into like seeing them in their experience, telling them and showing them how much I hear them, talking through the story of another client, how they went through the same thing, really going into how they felt and what they experienced and like really telling the story, not just high level of like, yeah, I got this client from here to here. We're like really going into like the emotional side of the story and how they felt. And, I really supporting an amiable buyer in selling, you're really supporting and offering reassurance. They tend to, on average, be a little bit more anxious to invest. They feel like they're kind of a little bit more reserved. And that's because they don't make things off of impulse and emotions really matter to them. So like they want to feel emotionally supported in the buying process and the buying decision. And so with that, I really try to always be there to offer advice and answer any concerns. And so what I mean by that is like I had a client actually who came to me and she had said, Kate, I'm moving and I have a baby on the way. And like, I just don't know, like, is this the right time to invest? Like, I just feel like I don't know. And I'm like, okay, well, like, let's talk about it. And I would acknowledge how she felt. I was like, listen, like, this is a really big chapter for you. And you're going through a lot right now. Like, you have a lot of new things happening. And so here's what I said to her.
I said, listen, I had another client. She came into the program and she was actually 2 months pregnant when she joined. And, obviously we have a 6-month program. So she was going to be right coming down to the wire when it came to, getting all the business ready for the baby. And she had the same thing, which was the fact that she had a lot going on. She also was moving into a new home that they were building and she was pregnant and she had all of these things in her mind. And she was like, is this the time? And she almost didn't move, to be honest. She almost decided not to invest because she was like, I feel like there's too much going on, too much going on. And I want to tell you what I told her. And I told her that, if you can build your business in the busiest season of your life, and I mean, you've got so much going on and you can build and navigate growing your business in that season, you then, during that time, whether you realize it or not, are being equipped with skills and principles and thought processes and habits and ways of operating and executing that you just simply can't get any other way than going through it. And so to me, you have to ask yourself, am I only going to build my business in slow seasons of my life? And if you're planning on having a baby and you're planning on having potentially growing your family, having multiple children, and you're going to have, people who pass away, and you're going to have moments where you or your partner or your children get sick, you're going to have these moments. And you have to decide, is this going to be something that stops you from growing your business? Or could it actually be that this is the best time to do it? Because if you can develop ways to grow your business in the most chaotic season of your life and the most busy, most stressful season of your life, you will have a handbook on how to do that again the next time it comes up. And most importantly, you will know how to build your business with ease in the moments when you don't have this going on. And, when I expressed this client who had felt the same way to her, and I had said, this client felt the same way, and here's what she did in her time with us. And so, listen, I can't make that choice for you. That's not mine to say. That's not mine to decide. But what I can be is, a place here to support you and answering any questions that you have and, kind of processing through this with you and making sure you feel 100% confident before you take next steps. I'm not pressuring her in that sales process. Okay. So I just broke the fourth wall again. So there you go, guys. I'm not pressuring her. I'm not saying, you have to do this. I'm offering an example of someone else who felt the same way. And I'm giving her a new perspective that she can open up to. And I'm validating the emotions that she's feeling. But I'm also acknowledging the fact that she does have an opportunity to choose here, but the choice is up to her. And that I am here to support her in any way that I can in making that decision, whether it is to work with me or not. And, the reason that I will say most people in that situation end up investing with me is because I don't pressure them, is because I hear them and I understand that that is a busy, busy, busy season. And many people in sales in these situations want to be heard. They want to be validated. They want to be understood. And so that's really what I do. Our motto in business is that we seek to understand. We seek to understand in any situation. And so let's bring this back to the analogy of the trainer, right? So if we want to hire a trainer and we're an amiable buyer, we're going to hire somebody that we're comfortable with. We're going to hire the person that we feel like, they've got good reviews, they're very caring, they're very encouraging. You're kind of like, they're almost like a personality hire in a way. Like you're like, I'm going to work with them because I just like who they are as a person. They often will be somebody who has really good rapport. They're very friendly. They have really good values. You resonate with what they stand for. And often an amiable buyer may even say, do you have a referral? Right? Like there's somebody who really, because they value relationships, will leverage other relationships in their life to decide on who they want to invest with. So that's our amiable person number 3. And now we're going to go into our final number 4, which is our expressive buyer. Okay. And listen, I know we're getting to time here, guys. And so we're going to go a little bit over, but I know try to keep these episodes always around an hour for you. But listen, this is going to be a game changer in your business. So hang on with me. Okay. And if you've been hanging on with me this long and you've been tuning in this long, I love you. I appreciate you. And I see you. And thank you for being here, because I can tell you this is going to be something that's really helpful for your business. Now, number 4, we've got our expressive, and these people are a hoot. Expressive people are emotional, they are spontaneous, creative, and very people driven. So let's go into their core traits. This is somebody who is impulsive based off emotion. So remember those driver buyers we talked about who really move quickly based off of outcomes and results? They are somebody who they're the exact same, but they move based off of emotion. They're very impulsive with the emotions that they operate from. They're very spontaneous. They make impulsive purchases. They're risk takers. They're very much somebody who's independent. They don't really, kind of succumb to societal norms. They don't really, shall I say, follow the beat of someone else's drum. They very much are someone who kind of follows their own pathway. And because they're spontaneous and they're very expressive, i.e., expressive buyers. They're also somebody who's going to be right up in there with your polarizing content. They're somebody who's like really into, if you have very direct beliefs, they're going to be someone who's right up in there with you. And with this, they also are somebody who really resonates with emotional based language. So, something I want to tell you about the core traits of an expressive buyer is the easiest way that I kind of look at this in my mind is like, it's very millennial of me to say this, but YOLO. And I don't know if that's a term that everybody knows, but YOLO meaning like you only live once. They are those people. They are so like, you know what, screw it, I'm in kind of mindset is how I think about them. They're so emotional in the way that they make decisions. They're very impulsive based off of emotion, and they do it because they're really trying to live and embody their highest level self. Okay. So they're trying to really tune into like, I deserve it, right? That type of mindset because like I'm going for this big life and I'm achieving big things. And there's actually quite a bit of people who leverage this type of marketing right now. And I have my own thoughts on that. But it really is a matter of people who are kind of raw in their marketing. The reason that they're raw, by the way, and this, I'm again breaking the fourth wall potentially for someone else's business. If you resonate with someone's marketing who's very, very raw of like, you can do it, you believe this, you're not the kind of person who's going to do this, you're going for big things in your life. If you're resonating with any of that marketing or messaging, you need to know that they're basically pulling out expressive buyers in their audience, i.e., they're only looking to market to people who basically are extremely emotional in the way they make decisions and that they can use the raw to get you so motivated and amped up that you move. And I'm sorry if I just ruined someone else's marketing for you because you may watch someone now and be like, wait a minute, they're doing it in the sense of like, you can literally, I can see now, which is like why for me, truthfully, marketing is almost like not fun because I can see what they're doing and I'm like, oh yeah. Like, like they're speaking to emotional buyers. They're rawing you into investing and you think like, "Oh my god, like they see me, they understand me." And like maybe they do. Maybe you're an expressive buyer, which is why you feel you resonate with it so much. But when they raw you and you feel like, "Oh my god, I love this person's marketing." The reason you love their marketing is because they make you feel good. And that's because they make you feel like you can accomplish the world and you can take on anything. But what they're also, you have to realize doing as a marketer, which is why having someone who uses these ethically is so important, as in like you're not using this to manipulate people, is because when someone knows that they have people in their audience who are very easily impacted by motivation, they can use that to their benefit. And we often see this, which is very unfortunate in the personal development space. People will use the raw to keep you coming again and again and again and again into investing into personal development. And that's because you're like, you want a bigger life, you want to achieve more. And they use that messaging to frankly constantly make people feel like the needle is moving. And so again, when it comes to all of these, it's about doing these ethically. It's not about using these to manipulate. And the one that I personally see manipulated the most is the expressive, because they basically get people to buy based off of impulsive emotion. And the thing that you have to also be very aware of because of this is that this is the most common buyer type that has buyer's remorse, which is when they invest and within short order, they realize, oh my gosh, this is actually not what I want, or this is not something I feel good about. And so when we're looking to talk to expressive buyers in our marketing, we want to use emotional based language. We're using, if you've seen someone's like hype reel and you feel like, ooh, like I feel like I want to invest with her because of that raw reel she made, or you feel like, someone has stories again that are very exciting, or they're really like constantly high vibe, that's someone who's really, marketing to expressive buyers. They also are someone who uses a lot of aesthetics and a lot of visuals to get people amped up. They are constantly somebody who is encouraging engagement. And so because of that, they often will know that you have expressive buyers because they're very in the raw with you and they're very much tuned into that emotion. They also are somebody who, because of emotion, may play to humor or play or fun within their marketing and kind of like play to the lightheartedness of just kind of like it not being serious. We don't need the details like the analytical buyer. We don't need to talk about the outcome or what we're going to help you to achieve like the driver buyer. Like they don't want to get into all that. They're just like, let's just play, let's have fun, let's go for our dreams. Like they kind of like really accentuate that in their marketing, which you can also do if you want to market to expressive buyers. And you really want to showcase your personality in your marketing. Like people really want to, again, they're still emotional buyers. Amiable is the more chill, reserved emotional, whereas expressive is the raw, raw, let's get it. I want to go for my dreams type of emotional. And so with these, they are somebody also who are more likely to be influenced by influencer marketing. So like celebrities, social media influencers. And that's because they don't really go through the nuts and bolts of why they're investing. They invest based off of the raw, raw and the momentum. So for example, like if they see that, a lot of other people or this person they're investing with is getting to this outcome as fast as possible, they may not even think to ask any questions about anything. They're just moving because they're like, ooh, I want to get there. That's what I want. I want that life. I'm investing. And so it's really not, they're just about the emotion of living their highest potential and their highest life. And because of that, they often make emotional, impulsive based decisions. So when we come to the sales process, the thing that we want to be constantly doing with this type of buyer when they're kind of like, I often will see in DMs, hello expressive, they're like, I just feel like I know I'm meant to be a seven-figure business owner, and like I just know that like I want to have a life of like this, and like I want to be able to like book first class flights, and like it's very emotional things. It's not like metric based things like I want to hit this goal. It's more like I just deserve this and I want to have this life, and it's very dreamy. That tells me that I have an expressive buyer in front of me. And so I match that energy and I start to talk about the things that they want to achieve. And so when I'm talking about what they want to achieve, that may have nothing to do with a number. It may have nothing to do with their marketing plan. It might be a matter of like, yeah, like, and listen, like as you said, like you want to be on first class flights and you want to have the ability to travel whenever you want, right? Like it's very dreamy. So I have to talk about their goal in the language of dream and not in anything else, because they won't resonate with anything else. And so you have to have excitement and enthusiasm when you're selling to this person, because they need to understand and be made to feel that you understand what their goals are and what it is they're looking to achieve. And so we want to be really showing an interest in their desires, an interest in their wants. We want to talk about how your product or service is going to improve their life, how it's going to get them the life that they want. It's not about the process of how you do it. It's not about just the outcome or the stat of where you're going to get them, the strategy. It's about like, how is you being the person who's going to help them with this product or service going to get them where they want to go? And so because of that, they're all about getting to the feeling that is the destination for them as fast as humanly possible. And so you have to show an interest in the life that they want and be able to, again, validate and make sure that they know that you hear what it is that they desire and that you're going to help them to achieve that. So again, back to our analogy, this person is going to invest with the trainer when we think about our example of someone who has enthusiasm at their workouts, who's kind of like rah, rah, let's get it. Like this is someone who definitely would love a boot camp. Like they love to be rah, rah toward their goal. They want someone who probably has a way of doing it in a fun and unique way, like kind of like a very trendy way. They're also somebody who's going to want to invest in the trainer who's extremely fun, very inspiring, someone who really motivates them, and also someone who makes them feel when they're interacting with them very confident and very motivated. And so that is our expressive buyer. So again, to go back to the highlight of the four that we discussed, we've got our two that are a little bit more strategy based, which is our analytical and our driver. They're a little bit more in the masculine energy. Analytical being all about the nuts and bolts. Drivers are like, get me to my outcome as fast as humanly possible. On the right hand side, the opposing side, we've got our amiable and we've got our expressive, both in the more emotional, more feminine energy bucket. And with this, amiable, a little bit more reserved in their emotions, a little bit more, I would say, slower in the emotional process of making a decision. They really think through things based off of emotion and emotional processing. Expressive also make decisions based on emotion, but they're extremely impulsive and they move quickly just like our drivers, but they do so based off of the emotional validation, not the validation of their goal. And so those are our four buyer types. So we've got our amiable, we've got our driver, we've got our analytical, and we also have our expressive. So those are the four buyer types that you need to know. And in each, we talked about how we're going to identify them, how we can market to each one of them, and how we can sell to them, as well as an example of what this would look like if someone was investing. So I know we went over our traditional time today, so thank you guys for hanging on with me. And I really hope today was helpful for you, because this is really something that, frankly, I literally teach at length. This is like as high level as I could go. There's more nuts and bolts to this and more depth to this if I was going to train this as like a masterclass, but this is the most podcast masterclass version that I could possibly create for you. And so my action item for you is, number one, I want you to try to identify which is your dominant. And number two, I want you to look at the traits that we discussed and look at what you're seeing in your sales processes. Go to your DMs, go to your calls, go to your marketing and say, which of my marketing is doing well? Is it more emotional or more strategy? What am I getting more of in the DMs? Am I getting people talking about their feelings and their emotions? Or am I getting a lot of people who are like, what does it come with? And what about this? And what about that? you'll be able to see based off what you see in there what kind of person you're really getting. And then because of that, we can really tailor your marketing and your sales around it. As I said at the earlier part of today's episode, the ability for you to tailor your marketing and sales to this is really a massive impact. You're going to see a really big domino because this has a huge emphasis on who resonates with what. And because of that, the results you're going to get from it. So, listen, I would love, it would mean the absolute world to me. And I could ask you a really big favor. If you could just shoot me a DM and tell me, what was your biggest highlight of today? What was the biggest takeaway for you? What was the thing that you're like, oh my God, I realized I'm a driver buyer? Just say, hey, Kate, I listened to the podcast and I realized I'm a driver buyer today. So thanks so much. Or I, realized that my audience is analytical and I've been marketing to them in this way. It would mean the world to me. I would just love to hear for you, what really hit home for you and what was your biggest takeaway of today. And you might notice in the podcast, if you're, one of my OG listeners and you guys know who you are, you may notice that I ask you to connect with me after these podcasts. And there's a reason that I also do that I will break the fourth wall for you. When you share your clarity, which is part of what a big emphasis is in coaching, when you share your clarity with somebody else, it actually integrates it further for you. So it integrates your understanding of something when you share it with someone else even deeper, which is often why they say when you get to a place where you can coach someone on something is really how you know that you've really integrated that information at the deepest level. And so I want to break the fourth wall. The reason that I also ask you to reach out and to share some of your insights is because what that does is it actually registers this message and this ability for you to integrate this information even deeper. And like, of course, I also will say it definitely fills my bucket. Like it definitely fills my bucket. I love to hear from you. I just love, love, love to hear from you. But it also fills my bucket. But yes, it also does help you to take this information and really integrate it at the deepest level, which is what I ultimately want for you and for your business. So listen, I appreciate you listening today. I appreciate you hanging out with me for the last hour. And I know we went super deep on this and know we went over time. So bless your heart for hanging on with me. And with all that being said, I will see you next week on next week's episode. And as always, stay ambitious.